Stoph Scheer is a puppeteer, writer, and director who has worked with the Jim Henson Company, the Muppets, and even Banksy. Stoph is also a writer, producer, and puppeteer for the surreal and nostalgic web series The Creatures of Yes, and has performed in Slumberkins, Puppet Up Uncensored, and the Muppets Mayhem. I sit down with Stoph to talk about her journey in puppetry and much more on this episode of Under the Puppet.
You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet.
Stoph Scheer, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Oh, thank you so much, Grant. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to have you here. We have performed together several times in Puppet Up Uncensored, which I know we're going to talk about. But I'm so excited to get to know more about you because, you know, on those days with Puppet Up, you don't really have a time to sit and chat and get to know all the backstory. So I'm going to start like I always do. Do you remember your first exposure to puppetry, the first time you saw puppets?
You know, for me, that's a funny question because I can't remember a time before I was already fascinated and obsessed with puppets. They were really the air I breathed in some way from a very young age. So yeah, I can't remember not being aware of Fraggle Rock and Sesame Street, and those were my main exposures. The Muppet Show was like this mysterious, like I was very young and didn't really know how to find it on TV. So when I'd catch a glimpse of it, I'd be like, oh, what's that? And Eureka's Castle was big for me too. But yeah, I was just. I was a neurodivergent kid with delayed speech, so puppets just comforted me a lot. And anything with two moving parts, I was turning into mouths, the styrofoam containers that like McDonald's food used to come in. And I'm from Long Island, so on occasions where we'd eat out at a restaurant, someone might have clams or lobster claws or something that could become a mouth too. So yeah.
So pretty early on, did you realize that people were controlling these puppets, like that could be something you could work towards?
I think so. I'm pretty sure that I did, but it's hard to say for sure. I spent a lot of time in dialogue with my own inner child, and I'm not sure what she knew or how she understood things. I was also really obsessed with magic, like sleight of hand magic. And because of this, people would occasionally like get me like a book of how to do tricks, and I'd eagerly, look through it, and I'd be like, oh, these are just tricks. This isn't what I saw on stage, which was real magic. So there was some kind of I was really good at suspending my disbelief at the very least. So I think the puppets were very real to me. I must have known that people were doing them because I was doing them myself all the time. But it's complicated. I cried after seeing Who Framed Roger Rabbit because that's when my parents explained to me that cartoons weren't real and that you couldn't meet them and get them out of crime heists and that sort of thing.
You were watching that film going, I have this all planned out. I'm going to help cartoons.
Yeah, just normal stuff.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your parents and your family, do you come from a creative family? Is there a creative streak in your family?
I'd say so. Yeah, I think by and large my family wouldn't describe themselves that way, but my older half siblings and my mother would, in my memory at least, this happened often. They would often take my stuffed animals and animate them for me and make them talk to me. And my parents were both pretty involved at the community theater in the village where I grew up. My father designed lights, and my mother mostly acted, but also occasionally produced and directed. So yeah, I'd be up in the booth operating the board for my dad as he set the levels, and I can remember trying to blind my brother David whenever he was up on the ladder. I'd try to surprise him and turn the lights on. Yeah, didn't fully understand how dangerous that was, and the booth was right next to the costume area. So I try to have a different hat on every time somebody looked up at me. And yeah, my mom was like, not in like a stage mom kind of way, but she was very casually my first acting teacher and most significant one. I can remember her reading me stories as a little kid and being aware that like, oh, when my mom reads me stories, it sounds the same as when she's talking. And when other people try to read me stories, they sound like they're reading. Like, and this was long before I knew how to read, but I was already like observing these things.
And where you're having the family that is, so involved in community theater, did you kind of get, like I think the answer to this is probably yes, just considering all the hat switches you were doing up in the booth. But did you kind of get that performing bug, and did you want to be a performer?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. The hats are telling in a way for the puppetry career to come, because it was more about it wasn't a look at me thing, like in show and tell. And I mentioned my speech was delayed. So even once I started talking, nobody could understand what I was saying. I basically spoke in gibberish, and I would just, bring my stuffed animals for show and tell and have conversations with them. And basically my earliest memories are being frustrated outside of show and tell that no one could understand me, and in show and tell finally having the satisfaction of people laughing at my antics. But again, it was to me it was about these objects, these characters, not about me. So likewise with the hats. And I did end up acting, but it came out of this funny conversation with my mom. She was like, "Oh, Stoffy, do you want to do this after school acting program?" And I was like, "No, I think I just want to do puppets." And she was like, "Well, there's not really any opportunities or resources in our village for you to do that. Why don't you just like act until you figure that out?" And so I started doing that, and through a domino effect led to me majoring in theater in college. So it was quite the diversion.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, like, did you start doing shows like in high school, or did that kind of come later in college?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely first fell in love with acting as a teenager. I wasn't very athletic or anything, and so community theater was my, you know, it's what built my self esteem, and it gave me a sense of like belonging that other kids might get from a team activity or something like that. And my high school, despite being in a very rural part of Long Island, we had a great AV thing. Our morning announcements were a short television show, so I would edit together videos for that too, and that was probably my other early, being bitten by the bug or whatever.
Well, and definitely skills that you'd be using later in your puppetry career as well. You mentioned, when your mom kind of said, well, why don't you do acting? And you said you wanted to do puppets. What were you doing with puppets at that time? Were you creating your own shows, or what was going on there?
It was very, disconnected from reality, which is probably part of what I liked about it. But, it was just a lot of practicing voices on my own and performing for myself in the mirror and that sort of thing. So it's really just imaginative play. And it's like when you spend a lot of time doing something, you forget that that's a weird thing about you because it becomes normal to you. So, like, puppets would kind of, there would be these eruption points, whenever there was room for creativity in a class project in high school. This puppet I had named Mr. Jubbles would be in it, and I would just be like, yeah, of course, I'm just a normal regular person, and I'm just going to put Mr. Jubbles into this history assignment. Or, one day on the morning announcements, the teacher was away, and I was like, great, Mr. Jubbles is going to deliver the news, and nobody's going to remark on the fact that he's a puppet. And so, yeah, I guess Mr. Jubbles was the earliest stuff that was for other people, and it never, because I was so immersed in my love of puppets, I don't know, it never felt like, ooh, I finally get to do it. It just felt like, yeah, of course I'm putting Mr. Jubbles in it.
Was Mr. Jubbles, was that a store-bought puppet or is something you built yourself?
He was store-bought. I wanted to build, but it's kind of similar to what I was saying about magic tricks being like, oh, that's not the real magic. I had read in a biography about Jim Henson that Muppets were carved out of foam. And so, I had my mother take me to whatever craft store was around at the time. I think it might have been before Michael's, but it was something like Michael's. And, they only had craft foam, the two-dimensional stuff. And I was just picturing, that at any craft store you could get these big, gorgeous blocks of foam and, just like standard gonzo head size pieces of foam or whatever. And when they didn't have those, I was like, oh, I guess it's impossible. And I just, it didn't match the perfect world in my head. So I let go of that. So anyway, yeah, Mr. Jubbles was, I think the brand was Play School, and it was a Muppet branded thing. The Play School made these whatnots that you could Velcro different face parts onto. So yeah, that's what Mr. Jubbles was, and my uncle gave me him for Christmas.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned that you went to college and you majored in acting, but you also, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, is it Muhlenberg College?
Yeah.
That you attended as well?
Yeah.
So can you talk about heading there and the decision to go there and the training that you received there?
Yeah, sure. Basically, I ended up going because I didn't want to apply to a lot of schools, and Muhlenberg has some kind of association with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is more conservative sound. They're actually the liberal branch of Lutherans in America. They just happen to have evangelical in the name. But my family's pastor, who I was very close with, was like, you have to apply to Muhlenberg. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll apply there and to one other school. And it was a really great program for me. It was a liberal arts program. So I ended up studying philosophy and religion on top of, the liberal arts requirements and my interest in theater. And I wasn't a naturally gifted singer or dancer. I've had to do quite a lot of both in my career, but it's something I've always had to work hard on. And when I think about Muhlenberg, I think the biggest thing that happened to me there is I said to myself, if I can't be a triple threat, I'll be a large amorphous threat. Like I'll just get whatever skills I can. So I ended up in the dance improv ensemble, where I was like the resident, like eccentric person who like couldn't keep the rhythm, but could like do very odd movements. And I studied Commedia dell'arte, which, looking back on it now is definitely like part of how I engage with puppets now, is how I was taught to engage with masks in that Commedia class. And a lot of voice and speech. I got very close with the voice and speech teacher. So he ended up mentoring me with dialects specifically. I had a knack for them, and Troy took me under his wing when he had too many projects. He would just send me off to, coach some student group or play or whatever with accents.
And this is something we've talked about on the podcast before, but puppetry really is, you talk about a triple threat. You have to do all these things in puppetry. You have to have the acting and accents and singing and the movement, even though, in a dance class, you're moving with your whole body. That I'm sure has informed your puppetry as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think that, that's part of what's so wonderful about puppetry. You know, Ronnie Burkett, the
Of
Canadian
course, yeah.
genius.
Yeah.
I was listening to a talk of his at the O'Neill conference a few years ago, and he referred to the Actors Theater as the ordinary theater. And you know, I gave up acting for a few years. Now I do. I have gone back to doing the occasional play, but for some reason, I don't know. I guess it just speaks to my love of puppetry. Like one could love puppets without being mean about the Actors Theater, but that just spoke to me, calling the Actors Theater the ordinary theater. Not because I'm against the Actors Theater, but because I resent the assumption that that's the normal. Like we're gonna do a play, and the default is people will play everything. Why? Why? Like puppets are so inherently theatrical.
And did you get any puppetry training? I mean, I know I have a question about your training with the Jim Henson Company, but before then, did you get any puppetry training anywhere else? Did you
Oh,
have any other experience?
I'm glad you asked that because I forgot. Yeah, at Muhlenberg, these guest artists came from Germany, this two-person company called Figurentheater Weil den Vogel. I, my German friends have criticized my German, so I probably said that terribly. But Figurentheater just means object theater, puppet theater in German. And Wild and Vogel are their names. They're students of Albrecht Roser, and they were the first people to like save me from just being a Muppet nerd. Because up until that point, that's what I was. I had a Muppet poster on my wall, and everyone knew me as the Muppet Kid. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm really glad that I didn't get shoehorned as just that. And Wild and Vogel helped open my eyes to the larger world of puppetry. So that was a really formative experience for me, as a theater artist and as a puppeteer. And then once I moved to New York City a couple years later, I connected with someone who's still a very, very dear friend of mine. Her name's Aura Fruchter. And we met in a clown class, and she mentioned that she was doing some stuff with puppets. And, as was the case in college with Vergoren Theater, Wild and Vogel, I was like, it's like this sleeper cell that has been in me since I was a toddler woke up again and was like, puppets, tell me more. Spend all your time with me teaching me about puppets. And Aura had been a student at Sandglass Theater in Vermont, so I consider Sandglass to be another big influence on me by way of Aura, although now I also do a fair amount of work at Sandglass, so there's some direct influence there as well.
Well, and also it's funny because we just talked about acting and dancing and voice work helps your puppetry, but I would say that studying other puppet styles also helps your puppetry too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's both literally the dexterity, but also just like I feel like I'm not an authority to speak on this, but I feel like the secret sauce, the it of like you have it, kid, is actually like imagination, because precision in manipulation and relaxation, all of these technical skills are very important, but like if you don't believe in what you're doing, I don't think being a technician is enough. It's not like card magic or something where, we like wiggling dollies is dismissive, but I don't know. I feel like I'm painting myself into a corner here.
No, you're fine. I just, you mentioned the O'Neill, and I've only been to the O'Neill once, but at the time I was very, I was working in Puppet Up. I was doing Puppet Up stuff, so I was very like Henson centric. Like you were talking about the Muppet Kid. I was very like, and even though in Puppet Up, as you know, we do different styles of puppets, it's all still, that Henson style of puppetry. And going to the O'Neill was like, whoa, there's all these different styles. And I know you're a very creative person too, but it's like seeing all these styles, you you're like, oh, I could do that with that style, and I could do that with that style. So, can you talk about? I know we're kind of jumping ahead, maybe, but going to the O'Neill and your experiences at the O'Neill.
Yeah, I really loved the O'Neill, and I got to go there twice, and both times were during my grad school at UConn, where I was getting a master's in puppetry. So I might not have been so shocked by all of the styles I was exposed to, although I'm not saying I didn't learn anything either. I learned a ton, but for me, the bigger deal was the community, like getting to be with like-minded people and getting to just unmask figuratively and talk about our weird special interests together in fellowship as a community. That was the big deal for me. And the my favorite part of the O'Neill is the late night pub shows, the open mics run by Tyler Bunch. I loved trying out new things at the pub, and I've been pretty active on the like puppet slam circuit subsequently, and it's because I accidentally developed like a whole repertoire just because of how much I loved the vibe cultivated by Tyler at the pub nights.
Yeah, well, this now as you're answering the question about the O'Neill, you drop on me that you went to UConn as well, because in my research on your website, I don't think it mentions UConn at all when I was coming up with questions. And UConn is the place to go to get a degree in puppetry. So talk about going to UConn, because we can't just gloss over that at all.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. I wonder what other major things I'm forgetting. Yeah. So I went to UConn not too long ago. It was a pandemic inspired decision. Basically, I was deep into puppetry by that point, running my own theater company, Doppel Scope, when the lockdowns started and everything was getting canceled. And so, my bread and butter was live performance at that point. And it seemed like, well, we don't know when that's coming back. And so my family encouraged me to start thinking about grad school. And as I thought about, all of the different things I could go back to school for, acting or philosophy, I thought, and I think this happened for a lot of people, the pandemic put me in kind of an existential place of mind. And I realized that learning to build puppets, I'd been a performer up until that point, but not a builder in my own right. Learning to build my own puppets was the only skill that felt worthwhile to go to grad school for, that felt like, even if no teaching opportunities ever open up for me in academia, even if this career doesn't work out for me, the ability to make my own puppets finally would be like something I could hold on to and that no one could take away from me. And so it came to pass. It's a very small program, which allows for a lot of personalization. So the faculty was very supportive in helping me craft my own kind of pretty far-reaching independent study, where I focused on carving puppets out of wood, which has led to my current obsession of making puppets out of all natural materials. It started with wood, but as I pulled on the thread, I was like, wait, even wood glue is made out of plastic. Oh, what did people use traditionally? Oh, hide glue. Okay, I have to get hide glue. And oh, can I make a Muppet style puppet out of sheepskin instead of out of faux fur? Oh, I can. Yes, yes, yes. So that's the kind of freak that UConn turned me into.
And because I've interviewed people who say that they've gone to UConn and it was like just too much and they kind of left the program. And I've interviewed people who absolutely love it. What was your experience with UConn? I mean, obviously it turned you into this, obsessed of making natural puppets, but what did you enjoy going there and the stuff you learned from UConn?
I definitely enjoyed it. And, I got my goal, which was to learn to build, but they also taught me to think about puppets, which sounds so pretentious, but is deeply valuable to me. Towards the end of my time there, I took a class called Puppet Modernism, taught by John Bell. And the class was not about the contrast between modernism and animism, but that's something that came up that, like, I got obsessed with early on, and I'm still like super into animism now. So that's the other thing that I took away from UConn is seeing the connection between, okay, here, I'll sound like a conspiracy theorist. So puppetry isn't very widely popular in the larger society. And I think that that's because it ignores the established modernist hierarchy where the human is above their environment. So I think the animacy of puppetry has far-reaching implications that make it a natural medium for people who are trying to establish any kind of sense of sacred ecology, or any other alternative to the madness of capitalist extractive evil.
Excellent. This is why I love improvising with you, Stoph, because these are the kind of things you come up with. And not saying that that's made up, but it's like you're just, there's people you improv with and you just go, this person is brilliant. And I know what's going to come out of their mouth is going to be brilliant. And so it's because you've done all this training and you've done, you're brilliant, and I'm super excited to get to perform with you. Well, let's go from the lofty stuff. Not that this isn't lofty, but let's go to your training with the Jim Henson Company, because you took a training workshop in 2021 from them as well, right?
I did, yeah, and it was oh my gosh, it was incredible. I mean, it was really wonderful for me because I had tried really hard earlier in my career to get into some of the Sesame Street workshops. I'd been a New Yorker in like kind of the first phase of my career before the pandemic. And I was just really hitting a wall there, and had kind of, not in a depressed or bitter way, but I just started to say to myself, okay, I can let go of this dream. It doesn't seem like it's happening. And having let go of that ever happening, when I got into the Hensing training program, which was so, beyond what I had ambition about or dreams about, I was able to just like really engage with the training itself without any hope or expectation about what would follow. And that was really special for me. 'Cause even though I love puppet theater and always have, always will, my absolute favorite thing is the Henson technique, is monitor puppetry. There's this, I feel a little embarrassed talking about it, but it's mystical for me. It's spiritual to, I've heard Brian Henson talk about this. You probably have too. The way that you, at the same time, fully the performer and fully the audience, that you're kind of creating theater for yourself. There's this wish fulfillment of, reaching that point where you get to stop thinking about the technique and can just wish that the character would do this or that, and then they do it, and that feels so magical to me. And so what I wanted from that workshop wasn't, to ingratiate myself with Brian or Kevin or Donna or whatever, or to like, become the next big Muppet person or anything. I just wanted to get better at this art form that I loved so much. So getting to do it, I know our workshop was structured a little differently than yours. Getting to just train like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for 3 weeks. Oh, yeah, it was amazing.
Well, in addition to the Jim Henson Company, you also did a little bit of training with the Muppet Studio as well, right?
Yeah. I received mentorship from Bill Beretta and Peter Linz and Alice Dinian, and that was really incredible as well. And I'm just so grateful for it because they in particular, Bill and Alice and Peter, are so passionate about technique and proper technique, and they really approach the Henson technique as like mime artists. Their economy of movement and stillness and relaxation and the fluidity that they encourage us to do, just like I don't know, it opened up a whole new world for me and gave me new things to obsess about.
Excellent. You always go into these things and then you say you come out obsessed. So that's I think a good attitude to have. Like you talked about how you went to college and you came out obsessed with this thing, and you went to UConn, you came out obsessed with this thing. So that's a good thing because you're always learning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to learn about something without getting obsessed about it, which means I will always be bad at math because I have difficulty getting obsessed about that.
Right. Yeah, we just got to. For me, I just got to become obsessed with things that will make money. Um, well, I want to talk about you. You worked on a lot of projects, and we're going to try and touch on a lot of them. But I know one of your big projects is the Creatures of Yes,
Ooh. Hmm.
and I want to make sure that I talk about this and we have time for it, because it's such a unique show. And from the very first video I ever saw, the Creatures of Yes, it's just so different from anything else. So, can you tell the audience maybe a little bit about what the Creatures of Yes is, and then how you got involved with the project?
Yeah, so the Creatures of Yes, which you can find on YouTube just by searching Creatures of Yes, is a vintage retro project that I produce for my dear friend Jacob Graham, who is the kind of auteur behind the project. And at this point, Jacob and I, write together as well. And I help Jacob with fabrication of puppets and set, although he's the real auteur visually. And when I say retro, Jacob likes to think of the project as literally a time travel project. He films it on antique cameras from the 70s as what he calls a reverse time capsule. So, the finished product is indistinguishable from a piece of lost media that might have been produced for like a public access station in the 70s. But thematically, we're not an overly political show, but we are both deeply gay, as are most of our collaborators. And so there's a lot of implicit progressive values that you wouldn't have been able to voice in the 70s. So it's kind of taking our modern queer values and saying, wouldn't you want to be on this timeline where it was okay to talk about this in the 70s? Like, imagine how far along we'd be now. As for how I got involved, like I said, it's really Jacob's project. So I saw his first several videos. I had just met him at a Puppeteers of America festival shortly before he started releasing videos. And I was in this odd place in my career at that point as someone who was like making her own stuff in New York City, where I had a couple years before I had sworn off working on other people's original projects. I was like, if someone wants to hire me to act in a play with a published script and they want to pay me a salary, that's fine. But working on other people's stuff always ends up being such a time suck, and I'm tired of just being a chess piece on someone else's board. I need that time and energy to make my own stuff. So I'd sworn it off, and that was a good decision. It gave me time to focus on my own original puppet theater. But when I saw the first few episodes of The Creatures of Yes, I said to myself, oh my gosh, like the world he was creating and the vision and the feeling of it, like you said, I'd never seen anything like it before. It has this wonderful quietness to it. When everything else is getting louder and louder, it's like quiet. And it was the only thing on the internet that I didn't ever pause to see how much video was left. It really took me somewhere else. So I wrote to Jacob. We barely knew each other at the time, and I said to him, I want to work on this, and anything you need help with, I'm yours. Like I basically, it was the end of my phase of not working for other people creatively, because what he was doing visually and aesthetically were skill sets that I didn't have, nor was especially interested in developing. Jacob's like a color theorist, and like a lot of that weird feeling, comforting warmth of the show comes from him thinking about and making choices about color that like I think he can see extra colors. Like those deep water shrimp that can see like 27 more colors than we can. I think he's got those shrimp eyes. So I was like, these aren't skills I have, and this is something I want to be in service of. So, I just started out puppeteering extra characters because at that point, Jacob and his brother voiced pretty much all of the characters themselves, so they needed extra hands. And then it just snowballed from there. It was in the pandemic that my involvement really got to the next level because we didn't have anything else going on. So we were able to, dig down deep and really start co-creating as writers and scene partners and stuff.
Excellent. Well, I know at the very beginning, at least when I first saw Creatures of Yes and I started watching it, there was sort of this, I don't know if I read this somewhere in a story about it or where I heard this, but that it was filmed like in a closet, like that it's a very small set. So, and maybe you don't want to give away all the secrets, but can you tell us about what shooting an episode, and maybe it's changed over the years too, but what a shooting an episode of The Creatures of Yes is like?
Yeah, it is true. We do shoot most of it in Jacob's bedroom closet. And of course it's very ironic to make a show with so many queer themes in a closet. We do occasionally leave the closet, especially for this big project that we started like 5 years ago or something, but we only just finished it. It's our first film. It's an hour long. It's called Come On Back, the movie. And that got pretty epic. And we shot some things in Jacob's living room, some in his puppet workshop, which is just like a guest room. I've slept in there too. So yeah, it's all filmed in Jacob's Brooklyn apartment. He recently started using a nearby studio, but we've yet to do any Creatures of Yes in it. So yeah, the closet's tiny, and we make it work. It's good that we've become very close.
Well, what I love about it is it shows that you use what you have, and you can make incredible things in a closet or in a living room or in a guest room, and to me that's inspiring. To me to see like this amazing piece of footage was filmed in a closet is like, wait, I can do that too. Maybe not to that level, but it's like I have a closet, I can use what I have, and that's what I think is one of the inspiring things too about The Creatures of Yes is, yeah, it has a style, it has a look, but it's just, two people going, there's more people involved too, but two people going like, hey, let's make this, and we can make it, and we're using what we have, and we're doing it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't know like a ton about your like Toily Productions, but I get like you're an at-home operation too, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, maybe that's why I'm so interested in it. Is like, oh, what, it's like going to the O'Neill. Yeah. It's like, oh, how can I use this thing for my thing? But it's, that's part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is not everybody is working on the Muppet Show. Not everybody is working in films or whatever. And to see a project like The Creatures of Yes do so well and just know that it was produced at home is just, it's very, very inspiring. So congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit more about the full length project as well? Because I want people to, I'm definitely going to link to The Creatures of Yes, but about the full length project as well. And maybe what working on that was like and how it was different from filming in the closet for just an episode.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Gosh, the shooting was super involved because Jacob really wanted to take it to the next level in terms of, so there's just these crazy trick shots where the way that the light reflects off of a camera lens to create the perfect flare had to be done just right, and all of this. So, we'd spend an entire day getting one practical effect done, or multiple days. And like I said, we started it like it had to be, it was before vaccines. So that it was actually my first time breaking out of like my own like family pod, was to like, Jacob and I and everyone in Jacob's apartment tested, and we waited for the test results, and then we holed up and started working on the movie. So another crazy thing for me is that I look at it and I see scenes that I shot before I received Henson training and after, and I have my own relationship with seeing that contrast, that hopefully wouldn't be too evident to other viewers, but we're our own worst critics. That notwithstanding, I'm super happy with how it came out. We completed about half of the film in those early lockdown days, and then we got so tired that we just moved on to other stuff. And so that part of what's exciting to me about this movie, thank you for letting me ramble, is that so the series for a little while after I first got involved was doing this narrative, this more of a linear narrative than we had done before, about this character Tom coming out of the closet as a homosexual, and then getting murdered by the Motion Picture Association of America because it was the 1970s and you couldn't be openly homosexual without being punished back then as a character in a film or TV show. Tom gets murdered by a bolt of lightning, and then there was this weekly episodic we did about exploring the subject of trying to bring Tom back from the dead. And all of this was leading up to this movie that we hadn't finished, but we got so burned out that we're like, we owe it to ourselves to just make like fun nonsense. And so then there was never any formal to be continued. We just started releasing short sketches that had absolutely nothing to do with what we'd done before. And our fan base, which is small but weird, like beautifully weird, like this is part of what I love about it. Like Creatures of Yes does these like unannounced 180s that leave people like wondering, like we'll take a really long pause and people think that we've like quit the project, or Jacob decided a long time ago to do it in black and white, and he just started doing it in black and white as an experiment. And if you like go through the video menu, there's this whole black and white era, and if you look at the comments, there's people were still into the videos, but you see some comments of people being like, what happened to the beautiful colors? Are they ever coming back? And like Jacob just like left them hanging. So likewise, like we're releasing these sketches that were just short and fun, and a lot more like edgy and absurd than what we'd done before. And we felt good about them. I think they're good, but we'd get these comments from our hardcore fans that were like, what about Tom? Is Tom ever going to come back from the dead? And this is largely unaddressed. So anyway, we've yet to drop this on the channel. We had a premiere at the Northeast Regional Puppet Festival in Ithaca back in the fall, and we're very excited. Well, by the time this is released, it will have just happened. At the end of February, there's a New York City premiere of the movie at the Jim Henson Carriage House on the Upper East Side. There's a showing in Ohio that will have happened. And we're working on a Los Angeles one, very early stages. But anyway, yeah, the channel's been quiet for a little while. And once we get our ducks in a row with these screenings, there's a whole new series about Ouija boards and hauntology that kind of bring us back to the Tom storyline. And it all culminates in this hour-long movie that took like 5 years to make, called Come On Back, which is about Mary Broomfellow's attempt to go to an alternate timeline where Tom wasn't murdered, and to steal that universe's version of Tom, even though this creates the risk of collapsing space-time and destroying the fabric of existence. So it's rated PG-13.
So, folks, if you have not seen The Creatures of Yes, you have plenty of time to catch up on it before this film drops. Well, yeah, and if people haven't seen it, you got to go see it because there's really nothing else like it. And I think people try to do retro things, but this feels very retro. So it's a worthwhile project. I want to talk about the couple of the other things we've done, and we kind of promised it up at the top, but let's talk about Puppet Up
Oh,
and
yeah.
being in Puppet Up because yeah, how did you feel when you first you had been kind of training and you've been in the training, but that first time you went out on stage as part of Puppet Up Uncensored with the Jim Henson Company?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was it's Puppet Up is such a dream job, and I get more and more comfortable with it, of course, the more that I do it. And I hope one day that I can really savor it because, as you know, our minds are so engaged, on so many levels, staying quick and present and in the moment on the improvs, but then being like mechanically precise on the vintage recreations and the choreography. Our minds are just stretched in so many different directions. And so it always, in one way or another, passes in a blur. And this was true of the first time, too. So I remember the thrill of being on stage, and I remember the relief of afterwards, being congratulated by Patrick and Brian and being like, oh, thank God, no one is actively firing me. Whoo. I've been blessed at these, big moments in my life, my first Puppet Up, or the day that I got to be a part of the Muppets Mayhem for a day. There are these big moments where I would probably panic, but I'm blessed with this ability to disassociate instead. And whenever something's too big of a deal, my brain tells me that I'm making it up. It's like, oh, you're not really about to go on stage in Brian Henson's Puppet Up. You're this is like a dream you're having. So just go with it. Just have fun. And so I'm able to pull that off. If I couldn't, I'd be dead in the water.
Do you have a favorite, because you brought up the recreations and you're a brilliant improviser in scenes I've done with you. Do you have a favorite part of Puppet Up, like either a favorite recreation or a favorite thing that you get to do as part of the show?
Oh, what a good question. For recreations, and I've gotten to be in a lot of them, which is very exciting. But I think for my favorite, I'd have to say Business, in which I play we call him Business Monster 1, the business monster that is voiced by Jim Henson and kind of starts the piece. It's my favorite vintage Henson piece, and I think it could have just been random, but I always took it as a little benevolence from Patrick when he first mentioned the possibility of that being put into the rotation because it hadn't been done in Puppet Up before. I rarely, if ever, like speak up for myself, so that was not my intention. But I pretty much started like jumping in my seat when he mentioned that they might do business, because I just I was just fangirling out. I just love business. So when Patrick put me in it, I think there was a little acknowledgement of, hey, you clearly seemed too excited about this. Go ahead and be in business. So yeah, I love it. And it's really hard in a way that's really fun to get good at. It's to climb that mountain and stretch those muscles. And for improv, I just love the flow state that we get into and learning to relax and have fun together. If I had to choose one structure, it would probably be slideshows. I've gotten to do slideshows a couple of times. I love everyone who I get to partner with there, but there was this phase where Michael Ostrom and I would get to do it with the premise being that we were inducting the audience into a cult. And Michael is, as you know, such a smart improviser, and that structure, slideshows where you don't know what the picture behind you is going to be, is such a fun structure. And getting to do the cult indoctrination. I grew up really religious, and that led to its own obsession. Like I said, I was studying Hinduism and Taoism and Eastern religions, especially in college. I just really deep dive into other cultures' mythologies, as well as, the obscurities of medieval theology in Europe or whatever. Getting to use all of that otherwise fairly useless knowledge was a joy. And I don't, maybe you feel that way about your history song, where you get to, lean into this strength you have of trivia.
Yeah, well, and you're a brilliant game show host and talent show host, and only a few people have hosted the talent show because Colleen, that Colleen Smith, that's like her piece, and Peggy has done it a few times, but you really take that over just incredibly as well too. So you're a brilliant puppet host as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was very intimidated stepping into that, having been so impressed by what Colleen and Peggy do with the talent show host. Once I found my angle, I was, you need something to hold on to. You don't want to feel like you're copying someone else.
Well, yeah, and Colleen and Peggy do it so differently as well, and then you've brought like this great third take on it, which is just brilliant. So,
thank you.
Friends, if you can see Stoph in Puppet Up, go see Stoph in Puppet Up.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you brought it up earlier, is Doppel Scope. Can you tell us a bit about that project?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, Doppel Scope is a collaboration started a long time ago at this point with my dear friend Aura Fruchter, who, she came up earlier, met her in a clown class, was one of my first puppetry mentors. We started doing experimental, adult-oriented work. We had a show called An Existential Sing-Along that was like a children's birthday party for adults, and a 2-person long-form improv show called Shrink Puppet Therapy, where the suggestion from the audience was whatever issue this puppet named Joey was working out in therapy. And, that was kind of the start of a Herald-like structure. It was for the audience, but it was also for ourselves. And I think we had a pretty unique voice. We always have had this impulse to approach dark or serious topics with comedy, because you can say things with comedy that, would be like, no one wants to watch a show about climate change and the end of the world if it's not funny. I say that as someone who's like a deeply concerned environmentalist. But that was our first family-friendly show, was about climate change and the end of the world. We were asked to, an old college mentor of mine at Muhlenberg College, we had gone back there as guest artists to do our adult clown show. And my old directing mentor, Charlie, was like, oh, you guys have a really unique voice. Have you ever thought about like writing something like marketable, that could like make money? And we were like, say more, Charlie. It's like, write a fairy tale, use a fairy tale, but what you actually do is up to your own weird little hearts. Just give it the name of a recognizable fairy tale. So we chose the Three Billy Goats Gruff and turned it into sort of post-apocalyptic parable, where the version of the Three Billy Goats Gruff that we know about the goats tricking the troll was goat propaganda. And the goats in that story are kind of like the Christopher Columbus figure. So, you learn the troll's version of the story, and the piece culminates with a coalition of trolls and young goats standing on the bridge together to stop the old goats from drilling for resources in the Valley of the Trolls. The villain is named Mr. Frack. So it's a little heavy-handed in a way that I like. But yeah, so we're doing weirdo adult stuff, transitioned into messagey kid stuff like that. And then as we kept making shows, we got less and less, the anger at capitalism never went away, but it got gentler and more playful because we had said what we needed to say. So our most recent show, which is still touring, it's called The Amazing Story Machine, and it's being co-produced by Sandglass Theater of Vermont. And in that show, it's about screen time. And the Story Machine itself is just a parody of all screen time. It's this giant steampunk television that at the beginning of the show, the cousins Grimm, these descendants of the brothers Grimm, turn on the machine for the first time, and it promises to, replace any need to tell your own stories. This will tell your stories for you, and it's so exciting you'll never go to bed again, and it'll explode your brain with scientific machine science. And after promising this and beginning its first grim fairy tale, it breaks down spectacularly. Steam shoots out of it, gears fall off of it. And this is like 5 minutes into the show. So the rest of the show is the cousins Grimm dealing with the fact that they invited an audience to this fiasco, and they promised them stories. So they take gears and other machine parts off of the machine and make puppets out of them, these sort of found object puppets made out of machine parts. And they figure out how to tell the stories with puppets. And what I'm really proud of about this show is that we're showing the young people in the audience instead of telling them. We don't need to say, hey, isn't this more fun than just watching something on a screen? And like, look how we're like, using our hands and playing with each other and connecting with each other. We don't need to say any of that, and we don't say that. They just see the fun that we're having, and they want to go home and have that fun too. So yeah, that's Doppel Scope in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, I will link to that in the show notes as well. As we wrap up, I wanted to talk, because you kind of mentioned it before. You've been able to work on at least two, possibly more, but two TV series that I know of. You worked on the Jim Henson Company Slumberkins and the Muppets Mayhem as well. So can you talk about your experience going from a youngster who loved watching these sort of shows on television, and then now getting to work on these shows?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's a cliche for a reason, but it's really a dream come true. I regularly make sure to update my inner child, like, hey, Stoffy, we're doing it. We're doing it. This is for you, buddy. So it would have been scary or intimidating if there wasn't such a clear tradition of mentorship in the Henson and Muppet spheres, as you know as well, So Alice and Donna and others on Slumberkins, and Peter and Alice on the Muppets Mayhem, just like, they love this puppet style and they want it to continue, and they know that it won't if they don't teach it to the next generation. So they're really loving in the way that they have guided me on these projects. Something that's like nuts for me in particular is, we talked about Creatures of Yes, filmed in a closet on an antique camera. So being on the set for these things, like I didn't know how much I didn't know about modern technology, since, prior to my Henson training, all of what I had done was intentionally antiquated. So, my first day on set for Slumberkins, like the camera's on this crane that can like do like any number of movements, like a Lakitu brother from Nintendo, just like following you around. And, it's on a green screen, and the puppeteers all have on headphones. Slumberkins was performed to pre-recorded voice acting, so everyone has on their headphones with the audio, and the set's completely silent. And there's a sound engineer that's just in charge of what the performers are hearing, because each performer gets their own separate beeps for when their line is going to start. And, as an assist on that show, doing arms and legs and random bits, at one moment I'm on Alice's character helping her, and at another moment I'm on Victor's character. So I was always having to go up to the sound engineer and be like, hey, switch me over to Victor's channel. I need his beeps so that I am with him when he needs a gesture or whatever. And I got kind of excited about this and diverted from my original point, which was it was such technology shock to witness all of this on day one. And I feel like there's this genre of literature from around the time that automobiles were invented, of somebody who lives in the countryside and hasn't been into town for a while and then gets freaked out because they're seeing a horseless carriage for the first time. And that's how it felt for me, being like, oh my God, these machines that you have.
But as long as you don't let it creep into Creatures of Yes, that we will be fine.
Yes, the Village of Yesterday's promise shall forever be pure.
Well, Stoph, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it, and it's been so great to get to know about all your projects. I do want to finish, like I always do, by asking you, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Oh my gosh. It's got to be Puppet Up, because there's any number of things that I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had to do all these things, but Puppet Up, getting to perform for Brian and with Brian, knowing that we're making him laugh. I grew up watching Muppet Treasure Island and Muppet Christmas Carol on repeat, so knowing that sometimes I get to make Brian laugh when he kind of taught me what laughter was in my childhood, that's got to be the most magical full circle thing.
That's amazing. Well, Stoph, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was so nice to spend this time talking with you.
Many thanks to Stoph Scheer for being on the show. For links to Stoph's website and social media, as well as to some of the other things we discussed, check out the show notes for this episode number 106, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my talk with Stoph Scheer, it's available to the bonus content patrons over at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. I want to send out a special thank you to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make the show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, Vicky Sebring, Ricky Chavez, Jeff Toro, and Lee Thompson. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. And thank you for your support. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, send them via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Facebook by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. This episode featured music by Dan Ring and was expertly edited by Steven Staver. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2025 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.